The courtroom victory against Ramesh Thoku sent shockwaves through Odosh Nagar. Arjun Mayer's name became synonymous with bravery and justice, but the battle was far from over. Thoku's conviction exposed the rot within the system, but it also unearthed a dangerous network of power brokers, each more ruthless than the last. Despite the public celebrating his win, Arjun knew his actions had painted a target on his back. The city's underbelly was stirring, and those who had thrived under Thoku's reign were already plotting their revenge. The aftermath of justice. Months after Thoku's sentencing, Arjun received an unexpected visitor, Meera Verma, the lawyer who had fought alongside him. She carried a confidential file and an expression that spoke of urgency. "Arjun, this isn't over," she said, placing the file on his desk. Inside were documents linking Thoku to an international smuggling ring. Drugs, weapons, and even human trafficking. Thoku was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "These operations are being controlled by someone far more dangerous," Meera continued. "A shadowy figure known only as the Viper. Every lead ends in dead ends or dead bodies." Arjun's instincts kicked in. He knew this wasn't a case he could handle alone. "We'll need a team," he said. "A new alliance." Arjun reached out to old allies and new faces. Along with Inspector Seema Malik, he recruited Kavita, the fearless journalist who had risked her life to bring Ria's evidence to light. Joining them was Aman Kapoor, a young hacker with a criminal past but unmatched skills in digging up secrets. The team began piecing together the fragments of the smuggling operation. They discovered a pattern. Every major bust or failed investigation seemed to trace back to a single name, Karan Malhotra, a wealthy businessman with deep political connections. On the surface, Malhotra was a philanthropist, funding schools and hospitals. But beneath the facade lay a cold, calculating criminal mastermind. The silent war begins. As the team dug deeper, the stakes rose. Kavita uncovered a whistleblower, an ex-employee of Malhotra, who claimed to have witnessed illegal shipments disguised as charity consignments. But before they could meet him, the whistleblower was found dead in a suspicious car accident. The message was clear: someone was watching. Undeterred, Arjun devised a risky plan. Using his blindness as a cover, he posed as a harmless bystander and infiltrated one of Malhotra's warehouses. His heightened senses detected faint traces of chemicals in the air, consistent with drug storage. Using a hidden microphone, he relayed the details to Seema and Aman, who mapped the warehouse's layout in real time. Their investigation uncovered a shipment scheduled for the following week, one that could expose the entire operation. But with Malhotra's network deeply entrenched in law enforcement, they couldn't trust anyone else. The ambush. The night of the shipment arrived. Arjun and his team prepared for the ambush. Seema arranged for a small, trusted police unit, while a man hacked into the warehouse's security system to disable cameras. Kavita stationed herself nearby to record the operation as proof of Malhotra's crimes. But things didn't go as planned. The team was ambushed by heavily armed guards. It became clear that someone had tipped off Malhotra. Chaos erupted as gunfire filled the warehouse. Arjun, relying on his heightened hearing, coordinated the team's movements and found a way to escape. Despite the ambush, they managed to secure a key piece of evidence, a ledger detailing all transactions, shipments, and names of accomplices, including several high-ranking officials and politicians. The Viper revealed. The ledger revealed what Arjun had feared: Malhotra was merely the public face of the operation. The true leader was the Viper, a figure so elusive that even Malhotra's men didn't know his real identity. The team worked tirelessly to decode the ledger, each entry bringing them closer to the truth. But with every step forward, danger loomed larger. Kavita's apartment was ransacked, Aman's systems were hacked, and Seema faced threats from within the department. One night, Arjun received a call from an unknown number. "You're brave, Officer Mayor," a cold, calculated voice said. "But bravery has its limits. Drop the case, or your team won't see another sunrise." Arjun's grip on the phone tightened. Justice doesn't bow to threats. And neither do I. In the bustling city of Odosh Nagar, Arjun Mayor had become an icon. Despite his blindness, his intuition and resilience amazed everyone around him. His story was one of determination, a tale of never backing down in the face of adversity. One day, a peculiar case landed on his desk. Riya Sharma, a 25-year-old law student, found dead in her apartment. The police had ruled it a suicide, but something felt off to Arjun. Riya was a bold and outspoken activist, fighting against corruption. Just days before her death, she had been gathering evidence against MLA Ramesh Thoku. Thoku was a powerful politician, his name always tied to fear and intimidation. Arjun quickly realized that the few clues present in the case suggested a much deeper conspiracy. Arjun started his investigation, ignoring his superior's reluctance to pursue the matter. He soon discovered that Riya had been targeted because of her work to expose Thoku's crimes. Witnesses reported that she had received several threats in the weeks leading up to her death, and her phone records revealed calls to an unknown person who claimed to have critical evidence against Thoku. But everything seemed to vanish once Riya was gone. People were too scared to speak, and the evidence had been tampered with. One night, while retracing Riya's last steps, Arjun received a tip from an anonymous caller, Kavita, a journalist. She claimed to have a crucial piece of evidence, a voice recording of Thoku threatening Riya. Kavita, however, was scared for her life and reluctant to meet. With the help of his trusted friend, Inspector Seema, Arjun tracked her down. She handed over a pen drive with the recording and warned him to be cautious. Soon after, Arjun's home was raided by unknown assailants. While they didn't find the pen drive, which Arjun had hidden, the attack made it clear that he was getting too close to the truth. The pressure mounted, but Arjun knew what he had to do. He couldn't rely on his corrupt superiors to act, so he took the fight to court. With Riya's younger brother, Rohit, and a determined lawyer, Advocate Meera Verma, by his side, Arjun presented the voice recording in court. Thoku's defense team tried to discredit everything, but Arjun's testimony was powerful. He spoke of his investigation, of the connections he had uncovered, and of the threats Riya had faced. The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. It was Thoku's voice, clear and unmistakable, ordering Riya to stop her investigation and threatening her life. Despite the defense's attempts to discredit the evidence, Arjun and Meera had anticipated every counterattack. Then, a twist, Arjun presented a hidden video that Riya had filmed herself before her death. The footage showed her confronting Thoku's men just before she was killed. The combination of the voice recording and the video led the court to a historic verdict. Thoku was convicted of murder and conspiracy, and his criminal network started to crumble. The case sparked protests against corruption, and Riya's memory was honored as a symbol of courage. However, for Arjun, this victory was bittersweet. As the dust settled from the court's ruling, he received a new, more dangerous challenge. Meera visited him with shocking news. Thoku had been only the tip of the iceberg. The investigation led them to uncover a much larger, international smuggling ring, and a mysterious figure, the Viper, was at its heart. Arjun knew that the real battle was just beginning. He gathered his trusted team, including Seema, Kavita, and a hacker with a criminal past, and they began to uncover a web of corruption and crime that reached deep into the city's political and business elites. They discovered that behind Thoku's public persona was Karan Malhotra, a billionaire businessman with ties to powerful figures. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous their investigation became. Arjun and his team were relentlessly pursued, their lives constantly at risk. Despite threats on their lives, the team pressed forward, uncovering evidence of drug shipments, weapon smuggling, and human trafficking. But the Viper, the mastermind behind the entire operation, remained elusive. One night, Arjun and his team set up a risky sting operation at one of Malhotra's warehouses. As they infiltrated the place, they were ambushed. Gunfire erupted, and chaos ensued. Yet, despite the attack, they managed to secure a critical ledger, a document detailing every transaction, shipment, and name of the accomplices involved in the smuggling ring. The ledger revealed a horrifying truth: Malhotra was just a front. The true leader was the mysterious Viper. The team soon realized that they were not only up against Malhotra's criminal empire but also a far-reaching network of corruption within the government and law enforcement. Despite the growing threats, Arjun and his team were determined to expose the truth. As they worked tirelessly to decrypt the ledger and gather evidence, they knew they were getting closer to the Viper. But with every step forward, the danger increased, and they found themselves trapped in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Then came a chilling call: "You're brave, Officer Mayor, but bravery has its limits. Drop the case, or your team won't see the sunrise." But Arjun's resolve was unwavering. Justice doesn't bow to threats. And neither do I. The battle for justice had entered its final, most dangerous phase. Arjun's team had uncovered the truth, but now, they had to survive long enough to bring it to light. The Viper's identity was still a mystery, but Arjun knew one thing: he would not rest until the entire criminal network was brought to justice. The fight was far from over. The Viper had to be unmasked. And Arjun Mayor would stop at nothing to make sure that justice prevailed. The courtroom drama was just the beginning of an even greater battle that lay ahead. Days turned into weeks as Arjun and his team pieced together the final clues. The evidence they had gathered was damning, but the Viper, the shadowy figure behind the entire criminal empire, remained elusive. Every lead seemed to vanish as soon as they got close, and with each passing day, the stakes grew higher. One evening, after a long day of sifting through mountains of documents and surveillance footage, Arjun sat alone in his office, lost in thought. His mind raced with possibilities, trying to connect the dots that had eluded them for so long. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Meera, the determined lawyer who had stood by him through thick and thin. "Arjun," she said urgently, "I've found something that could be the break we've been waiting for." Arjun's pulse quickened. "What is it?" "I've been going through Thoka's old case files," Meera continued, her voice tense. "And I found something unusual. There's a name that keeps coming up in every report related to the Viper, a man named Vikram Singh. He's a ghost, Arjun. No one knows much about him, but all signs point to him being the Viper's right-hand man." Arjun's heart skipped a beat. "Singh. I've heard that name before. He's connected to the underworld in some way, but he's always kept his distance from the spotlight." "That's exactly it," Meera said. "I think he's the key to everything. If we can find him, we can finally unmask the Viper." The next few days were spent tracking down every lead they could find on Vikram Singh. A man worked tirelessly, hacking into various databases and digging into Singh's past. Seema and Arjun followed every lead, hoping it would bring them closer to the truth. Finally, after days of relentless searching, a man uncovered a breakthrough. "I found something," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "Singh has been using a private jet to fly in and out of the country. He's been to several places linked to Malhotra's operations, but one flight stands out: he flew to a remote island last week. And guess who was with him? Karan Malhotra." Arjun's mind raced. This was it, the connection they had been looking for. Malhotra and Singh, the two men behind it all, were finally in the same place. Arjun turned to his team. "We're going after them. This is our chance to bring them down once and for all." The team made their way to the island, a secluded spot that was difficult to access. They had no backup, no way of knowing what they'd face once they arrived. But Arjun knew they had to take the risk. As they approached the island in a small boat, the tension was palpable. The sea was calm, but the air was thick with anticipation. They could see the distant outline of a large estate perched on a cliff. It was here, on this isolated island, that the masterminds behind the criminal empire were hiding. Once they reached the shore, the team moved swiftly, using the cover of darkness to infiltrate the estate. They encountered minimal resistance, as Singh and Malhotra seemed to be unaware of their approach. As they made their way deeper into the compound, Arjun's mind sharpened. His heightened senses detected movement ahead. Suddenly, they were ambushed. A group of armed guards appeared from the shadows, guns raised. A fierce firefight erupted, and Arjun's team fought with everything they had. Arjun, using his heightened hearing and intuition, guided the team through the chaos. Every step, every movement was calculated. His training had prepared him for moments like this, and despite the odds, they managed to overpower the guards. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum of the estate, where they found Malhotra and Singh. The two men were sitting in a lavishly decorated room, completely unaware of the danger closing in on them. "Vikram Singh," Arjun said, his voice cold. "You and Malhotra thought you could hide behind your empire of lies, but your time is up. Singh's face twisted in anger as he stood up. You think you've won, Arjun? You've only scratched the surface. The viper is bigger than you can imagine. Who is the viper? Meera demanded, stepping forward. Tell us now, before it's too late. Singh's smile faded, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Just then, the door slammed open, and another figure entered the room, a man in a black suit, with a face that was both familiar and unfamiliar. He stepped into the light, and Arjun's blood ran cold. It was the city's most powerful judge, Justice Pradeep Kumar. Surprised, Arjun? The judge's voice was calm, almost mocking. I've been the viper all along. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through Arjun's mind. Justice Pradeep Kumar, a man he had once trusted and respected, was the viper, the mastermind behind the entire criminal empire that had wreaked havoc on Nagar. The shock was palpable, not just for Arjun, but for his entire team. They had been chasing shadows for so long, only to find that the most dangerous enemy was the one who had been in plain sight the entire time. You're the viper? Arjun's voice was a mixture of disbelief and rage. But you're supposed to uphold the law. You've betrayed everything you stood for. Justice Kumar's cold smile only deepened. The law is a tool, Officer Mayor. A tool to control, to maintain power. I've been in this system long enough to know that true power lies in the shadows. And that's where I've always thrived. Arjun's fists clenched. The weight of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. You've destroyed so many lives. Riya Sharma, all those innocent people, for what? Power. Greed. Kumar chuckled darkly. You think this is about power? It's about survival. The system is rotten, Arjun. And if you want to survive, you need to be at the top. You've been chasing your own version of justice, but there's only one truth. Those who control the system control everything. And I've been doing just that. Meera stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. You think you're untouchable? You've made a lot of enemies, Kumar. There's no way you'll get away with this. Kumar's gaze shifted to her, his smile never faltering. Do you really think anyone can stop me now? I'm the one who decides who lives and who dies. I control the courts, the police, the politicians. Every single person who's tried to stand in my way is either dead or too afraid to speak. Your precious justice is just an illusion. Arjun felt a surge of anger rise within him. The man who had helped convict Thoku, who had fought so hard for justice, was now standing in front of him as the very symbol of corruption and evil. But Arjun wasn't ready to back down. I won't let you win, Arjun said, his voice steady but fierce. You've underestimated the power of truth. And I won't stop until I expose you for what you are. Kumar's eyes gleamed with malice. You think you can defeat me? You're nothing but a blind cop. I've planned every move, every step. You've already lost. Just then, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Arjun's heart raced as he realized that backup was on its way. His team had managed to signal for help, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned. We've still got a chance, Seema whispered, his voice tense. We can't let him get away. We've come this far, Arjun. We need to stop him now. Arjun nodded, determination flooding his veins. We're not backing down. Before Kumar could react, Seema lunged forward, tackling one of his guards to the ground. The others followed suit, quickly overpowering the remaining men. It was a fight for survival now, but Arjun and his team had trained for this. Despite the odds, they managed to disarm the guards and neutralize the immediate threat. However, Kumar had already begun to retreat, moving toward a hidden escape route in the back of the estate. Arjun moved swiftly, his senses heightened, knowing that this was the moment to end it all. But just as he reached the door, he heard a gunshot. Arjun's body stiffened as a bullet whizzed past his ear. He spun around to find Kumar standing at the top of a staircase, his revolver aimed directly at Arjun. You really think you can bring me down, Arjun? Kumar sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. This is where it ends for you. But before he could fire, a voice echoed from behind him. Not so fast. It was Meera. She had been quick to spot the gun in Kumar's hand, and without a moment's hesitation, she fired a warning shot, striking the revolver from his hand. The gun clattered to the floor as Kumar turned, his eyes now filled with fury. "You think this is over?" Kumar spat, his face contorted in rage. "You can't stop me. I'm untouchable." Arjun, still focused, took a step forward. "You're wrong. The law may have failed, but it's not too late for you to face justice. You'll never get away with this." With the sound of approaching sirens growing louder, Kumar knew his time was running out. He turned and ran, but the team was ready. Seema and a man quickly blocked his escape route. The judge, once so sure of his power, now found himself cornered. "Get him," Arjun commanded. In seconds, the team subdued Kumar. The man who had once held the law in his hands now lay powerless, his fate sealed by the very justice he had once controlled. As the police arrived and took Kumar into custody, Arjun felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The battle wasn't over, there were still many criminals left to bring to justice, but the Viper had finally been unmasked. The Viper was finally in custody, but Arjun knew this victory was only the beginning of a much larger war. Justice Kumar's arrest sent shockwaves through the city, shaking the very foundations of the corrupt system that had allowed him to thrive for so long. However, the deeper Arjun dug into Kumar's operations, the more he realized just how vast and interconnected the criminal empire truly was. The authorities quickly began to investigate Kumar's associates, but it became clear that his network stretched far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. Judges, politicians, businessmen, powerful people who had all been in league with the Viper. The idea that so many people at the highest levels of power had been corrupted left Arjun with an overwhelming sense of urgency. As Arjun and his team regrouped after the arrest, Meera stood by his side, a concerned look on her face. "We've done it, Arjun. Kumar is in custody. But there's still a long road ahead. The people he worked with, the ones still out there, they're going to do everything they can to make sure their secrets stay hidden." Arjun nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. But I won't rest until we've exposed every last one of them. We need to be prepared for what's coming next." The following weeks were filled with relentless investigations. Arjun, Meera, Seema, and the rest of the team worked day and night, going through mountains of documents, tapping into hidden accounts, and uncovering the network of corruption that had nearly destroyed their city. Every step brought them closer to the core of the operation, but each discovery also led to more danger. They couldn't trust anyone, not even those who had once seemed like allies. One day, Arjun received a cryptic message: "You've uncovered the surface, but the real game is much deeper. If you want to know the truth, follow the money." The message came from an anonymous source, but Arjun knew it was a lead he couldn't ignore. The next day, he met with a man who had been working tirelessly to trace financial transactions linked to Kumar's criminal dealings. "I've found something," a man said, his eyes glued to his screen. Kumar's accounts were a maze of shell companies, but one name keeps popping up: Arvind Patel. He's a high-profile businessman, a close associate of Kumar, and has been funneling money to a hidden offshore account for years. "Patel," Arjun muttered, recalling the name. "He's connected to some of the city's most influential people. If he's involved, we might be looking at an even bigger conspiracy." Arjun's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. But he knew they were still playing a dangerous game. Every new lead put them closer to exposing the heart of the network, but it also put them further in harm's way. They had to act quickly. Later that evening, as Arjun and Seema staked out Patel's estate, the tension was palpable. They had no idea what they were walking into, but one thing was certain: they were closing in on the truth. As they watched Patel's mansion from a distance, Arjun's phone buzzed. It was Meera. "Arjun," she said, her voice shaky, "there's been an attempt on my life. Someone tried to break into my apartment tonight. They're getting desperate." Arjun's heart skipped a beat. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine for now," Meera replied, "but I think they know we're onto them. I can't let them intimidate me. I'll be at the office tomorrow. We need to keep pushing forward." Arjun clenched his fists. "We will. But you need to be careful. This is getting more dangerous than I thought." The following morning, they gathered at their makeshift headquarters. They had no time to waste. Every second counted. Arjun knew that the more they exposed, the more danger they were in. Patel, it seemed, was the last piece of the puzzle, but no one could predict just how far he was willing to go to protect his empire. Arjun, Meera, Seema, and a man were determined to take down Patel. They gathered every shred of evidence, every account, every transaction they had linked to him. As they prepared for the final confrontation, the weight of their mission was clear. But there was one final twist that Arjun hadn't anticipated. Just as they were about to move in, Meera received a phone call. Her face went pale as she listened to the voice on the other end. "It's Patel," she whispered, hanging up the phone. "He's threatening to kill someone close to me. He wants me to stop investigating." Arjun's heart sank. This was the final warning, the one they couldn't ignore. He knew what had to be done. "We can't back down now," Arjun said, his voice steely. "We've come too far to stop. If Patel thinks we're going to be scared off, he's wrong. We're going after him, today." The final showdown was set. Arjun and his team stormed Patel's compound, prepared for whatever they might face. They knew the stakes were higher than ever. Inside, Patel awaited them, surrounded by his armed guards. He had nowhere to run, but he was still dangerous. The confrontation was intense. Shots rang out as the team fought their way into the heart of Patel's operation. Arjun's instincts guided him through the chaos, every move calculated, every decision made with precision. He could feel the end of the journey drawing near, but the tension was unbearable. They were moments away from unmasking the final piece of the puzzle. In the heart of Patel's lair, they cornered him. "It's over, Patel," Arjun said, stepping forward. "You're finished." But Patel, never one to surrender, laughed. "You think you've won? You don't understand. This isn't just about me. This is about a much bigger network. Even if I fall, someone else will take my place." Arjun's eyes narrowed. He had heard enough. He wasn't going to let Patel's threats scare him. He'd already seen the lengths to which these people would go to protect their empire. But the truth would come to light, no matter the cost. The walls of the mansion closed in on Arjun and his team. Patel was cornered, but his words lingered in the air, a chilling reminder that they weren't just dealing with a man, they were up against an entire system. Arjun's grip on his weapon tightened. The truth had never been more urgent. Patel smirked, his back against the cold, hard wall, but his eyes were full of fury. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Arjun. I'm just one piece of the puzzle. Even if you take me down, the power behind me will crush you. They're everywhere." Arjun's mind raced, processing every word, but there was no time for doubts. He motioned for Seema and a man to keep their eyes on the exits while Meera began gathering the final pieces of evidence. She was focused, determined. But something in her expression hinted at the deep weight of what they had uncovered, what they were up against. "Where are they, Patel?" Meera demanded, her voice steady despite the obvious fear that gripped her. "Who are the people you're working for? This empire of yours, it's not just about money. You've taken lives, corrupted everything." Patel chuckled, his eyes dark. "You think you can stop it all? There are more like me out there, hidden behind masks of respectability. Judges, politicians, businessmen. They've been pulling the strings for decades. They'll never let you expose them." Suddenly, a faint beeping sound echoed from the corner of the room. A small device, barely visible on the desk, blinked in the dim light. Arjun's heart skipped a beat as he recognized it. "Is that a detonator?" Seema asked, his voice low with panic. Patel's smirk deepened. "You really think I'd let you walk away with everything? I've set it all up, Officer Mayor. You've walked straight into my trap. The entire mansion is rigged to go down in flames. You'll all burn with me." Arjun's mind raced as adrenaline surged through him. The walls were closing in, the stakes higher than ever. But he couldn't allow Patel to escape. He knew he had to think quickly, lives were on the line, including his own team's. Without hesitation, Arjun reached for the device, disarming it with practiced precision. He had faced danger many times before, but this was different. This time, it was personal. Patel's plan had failed, but the clock was ticking. "We're not leaving without you, Patel," Arjun said, his voice low and steady. "This ends today." But Patel wasn't finished. He lunged for a hidden compartment in the desk, pulling out a gun. A shot rang out, echoing through the mansion. Seymour barely managed to duck, but the bullet grazed his arm. His face twisted in pain, but his resolve only hardened. Seymour! Meera yelled, rushing to his side. Arjun's eyes locked onto Patel. The man was dangerous, but Arjun had the advantage now. He'd already taken too much. The law had to prevail, no matter the cost. Patel's hand shook as he aimed the gun at Arjun. "You're too late," he hissed. "You'll never make it out of here alive." A deafening sound filled the room. Gunfire erupted as Arjun fired, his bullet striking Patel in the shoulder. The weapon dropped from his hand, and Patel crumpled to the ground, writhing in pain. But just as Arjun moved forward to cuff him, a voice rang out from behind them. "You think it's over?" Arjun froze, his heart pounding. Another figure emerged from the shadows, a man he had never expected to see. Justice Pradeep Kumar, the Viper himself, stepped into the room, a mocking grin on his face. "You didn't think I'd just sit back and let you ruin everything, did you, Arjun?" Kumar sneered. "I always have a backup plan." Arjun's eyes widened as he realized the danger had only escalated. The real mastermind had been hiding in plain sight all along, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Kumar had survived the ambush, and now he was back with a vengeance. Meera looked at Arjun, fear in her eyes, but also the resolve to finish what they'd started. "We can't let him win. Not now." Kumar's expression was cold, his eyes dark with malice. "You've made a mistake, Arjun. You think you've uncovered the truth. You've only touched the surface of a much deeper game. The system is bigger than you. You've lost, Kumar," Arjun said, his voice steady despite the. Kumar laughed bitterly, his voice echoing in the empty space. "You think the world will just fall in line because you found the truth? You're naive. It's never been about justice. It's about control." But Arjun wasn't listening anymore. With the support of his team, they moved quickly to neutralize the threat. They had come too far to let Kumar escape justice now. In a swift, coordinated move, Seymour and a man pinned Kumar to the floor, restraining him as Arjun approached, his face set in determination. "This is over," Arjun said coldly, as he cuffed Kumar, the once powerful judge now defeated. "You will pay for every life you destroyed." As the authorities arrived, the team stood together, the weight of their victory slowly sinking in. The Viper's empire had been brought down. But as Arjun looked out at the horizon, he knew the battle wasn't over. The corruption had run deep, and there would be more to fight. But for now, justice had won. The fall of Kumar and Patel sent ripples through the city, but the echoes of their actions would not fade so easily. The system they had built, a tangled web of power and corruption, was not something that could be dismantled overnight. As Arjun, Meera, Seymour, and a man watched Kumar being led away in handcuffs, the relief was palpable. Yet, there was an undeniable tension hanging in the air. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Arjun threw himself into the investigation with even more fervor. Every new lead was a potential clue to unraveling the remaining pieces of the empire. But despite his relentless pursuit of justice, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every corner they turned, every breakthrough they made, seemed to invite new threats. The higher-ups, those who had operated in the shadows, were still out there waiting. One evening, as Arjun sat at his desk, going over case files, Meera entered the room. Her face was tired, but her eyes were determined. "Arjun," she began, her voice heavy with the weight of what she had discovered. "I've found something. Something big. But it's not just about the criminals we've already taken down." Arjun looked up, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Meera took a deep breath and slid a folder across the desk. This came from an anonymous source. It's a list of names, top politicians, influential businessmen, judges, people who have been involved in the operation for years. But there's something more. The Viper's network isn't just a criminal syndicate. It's a shadow government, controlling everything. Arjun opened the folder, his heart racing as he scanned the pages. The names were familiar, some of the city's most powerful figures, others known only to a few, but all connected by a string of deceit that had been pulling the city's strings for far too long. "They're embedded everywhere," Arjun murmured, his voice full of disbelief. "How deep does this go?" Meera shook her head. "Deeper than we ever imagined. These people have been orchestrating events behind the scenes. The murders, the corruption, the manipulation, it's all been planned. And if we don't stop them now, it's only going to get worse." Arjun clenched his jaw. He could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. "We can't let them continue to run this city like a puppet show. We need to take them down, every single one of them." The next few days were filled with action. Arjun, Meera, Seema, and a man dug deeper into the web of corruption, trying to piece together the final layer of the conspiracy. They worked tirelessly, uncovering evidence, making connections, and planning their next moves. But it wasn't long before they realized that they were being pursued by forces far more dangerous than they had anticipated. One night, as Arjun drove home after a long day, he felt the eerie sensation of being followed. He glanced in his rearview mirror to see a black SUV tailing him. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know who was behind the wheel, but he knew it wasn't a coincidence. They had made a powerful enemy, and now that enemy was hunting them. Arjun's instincts kicked in. He swerved sharply onto a side road, hoping to lose the tail. But the SUV followed, relentless and fast. The chase was on. He could hear the roar of the engine growing louder as the vehicle closed in on him. Adrenaline flooded his system. Arjun's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he pushed the car faster, taking sharp corners at breakneck speed. He glanced at the rearview mirror again, no sign of slowing down. The SUV was still right behind him. Suddenly, a shot rang out, shattering the back window of his car. Arjun ducked instinctively, his heart racing. He could hear the sound of tires screeching as the SUV attempted to cut him off. The danger was no longer just in the form of a chase, it was a life-or-death struggle. He took a sharp turn, heading toward a more secluded street, hoping to lose them in the maze of alleyways. But just as he thought he might get away, the SUV blocked his path. The car screeched to a halt, and Arjun could hear the sound of doors opening. The figures that emerged were clad in dark clothing, their faces hidden by masks. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Arjun knew he was outnumbered, but he refused to back down. "What do you want?" Arjun called out, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. One of the masked figures stepped forward. "You've been a thorn in the side of the wrong people, Officer Mayor. The Viper was just the beginning. You've exposed a far greater danger, and now it's time for you to disappear." Before Arjun could react, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. The world spun as he collapsed to the ground, his vision blurring. He could hear the sound of footsteps approaching, but everything seemed distant. His body was weak, his mind clouded by the pain. But just as the darkness began to take over, a familiar voice rang out in the distance. "Arjun! Meera!" Her voice was filled with urgency, and Arjun's heart surged with relief. His team had found him. The masked figures hesitated, realizing they had been ambushed. In an instant, gunfire erupted. Seema and a man fought fiercely, keeping the attackers at bay, while Meera rushed to Arjun's side. "Arjun, stay with me," she said, her voice frantic as she applied pressure to the wound on his shoulder. "We've got you. Just hold on." Arjun's vision was fading fast, but he forced himself to stay conscious. He couldn't let this be the end. Not like this. Not when they were so close to the truth. As the battle continued around them, Arjun whispered, "We'll finish this, together." The world around Arjun blurred as he fought to stay conscious. His vision darkened, and the pain in his shoulder throbbed like a distant echo. Meera's voice, full of panic, seemed to fade in and out as the adrenaline coursed through his veins. "Arjun, hold on," she shouted, her hands applying pressure to his wound. But despite her efforts, the blood continued to pour from the injury, and Arjun knew that time was running out. Somehow, amidst the chaos, Seema and a man managed to subdue the remaining attackers. The sound of gunfire echoed into the night, but the masked figures were no match for the team's resolve. The attackers were either captured or forced to retreat into the shadows. Meera's eyes, filled with fear, met Arjun's as he fought to stay awake. "You're going to be fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "We're almost there, Arjun. We can still finish this." But Arjun could barely focus on her words. His vision was slipping. Every breath he took felt heavier than the last, his body screaming for him to let go. But he couldn't. There was too much at stake. Don't let them win," he whispered, barely audible. His fingers clenched weakly around her hand as a surge of determination rushed through him. "We need to bring them all down. We need to expose them, for good." Mira's face softened, a mixture of pain and admiration in her eyes. She knew exactly what he meant. Even as the shadows threatened to overtake him, Arjun still fought for justice. He had always fought for the truth, no matter the cost. "We will," she vowed, her voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. "We're not done yet. We'll finish this, Arjun. You have my word." The sound of sirens grew closer, signaling the arrival of backup. The authorities had been notified, and soon the street would be swarming with officers, medical teams, and investigators. But for now, all Arjun could hear was the frantic pounding of his own heart, and the steady reassurance in Mira's voice as she continued to tend to his wounds. Hours later, Arjun woke up in a hospital room, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling the air. The room was quiet, but the memories of the night before flooded his mind. The attack, the gunshot, the adrenaline, and the uncertainty. He groggily turned his head to see Mira sitting beside his bed, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but unwavering. "You're awake," she said softly, a small, relieved smile crossing her face. "You gave us quite the scare." Arjun let out a weak laugh, wincing as the pain in his shoulder reminded him of how close he had come to not making it. "I'm not going anywhere yet," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You sure about that?" Mira teased lightly, but the concern was still evident in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "I'm sure. There's still too much to finish. We can't stop now, Mira." She leaned forward, her voice soft but resolute. "You're right. We've come too far. And we're not letting anyone get away with what they've done. You're going to heal, and then we finish this. Together." Arjun smiled weakly, grateful for her support. He knew that the road ahead would be dangerous. The truth they had uncovered about the shadow government was just the tip of the iceberg. There were powerful people out there, people who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. But he also knew something else. They had each other. And that was something the enemies they faced could never take away. Weeks passed, and Arjun's recovery was slow but steady. The wound on his shoulder healed, but the emotional toll of the battle lingered. His team continued to work tirelessly, digging deeper into the corruption that had been buried for years. Every new piece of evidence they uncovered painted a clearer picture of the vast network of criminals, politicians, and businessmen who had conspired to control the city from the shadows. Despite the growing danger, Arjun and his team pressed on. They had no choice. The battle for justice wasn't just a personal crusade anymore, it was a mission to protect the innocent and expose the powerful forces that had been manipulating the system for far too long. But the deeper they went, the more the threats escalated. Anonymous messages, shadowy figures lurking in the background, and increasingly brazen attempts on their lives kept the team on edge. Arjun knew that no one was safe, not even those closest to him. One day, as the team gathered in their makeshift office, Seema burst in, his face grim. "We've got a lead," he said, his voice tense. "A major player in the network. Arvind Patel. He's been in hiding, but we know where he's going to be." Mira's eyes narrowed. "We've got to take him down. Now." Arjun, still healing but more determined than ever, nodded. "This is it. The final piece of the puzzle. We take him down, and the whole operation falls." As they moved in on Patel's hideout, the tension was palpable. Arjun's mind raced, every instinct telling him that this mission was crucial. They couldn't afford any mistakes. Patel was the last of the major players, and once they took him down, the whole system would collapse. But as they approached the location, a sharp realization hit Arjun. This wasn't going to be as simple as they thought. Patel wasn't just hiding, he was preparing for something far worse. As Arjun and his team closed in on Patel's hideout, the air was thick with tension. They knew this was their chance to end it all, the web of corruption, deceit, and murder that had plagued their city for so long. But something in the pit of Arjun's stomach told him that things wouldn't go as smoothly as they hoped. The hideout, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, was eerily quiet. The team moved cautiously, their steps light, weapons ready. Arjun's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the entrance. This was it, the culmination of everything they had worked for, fought for. "Stay sharp," Arjun whispered, his voice low and steady. His eyes scanned the area, every corner, every shadow. They had no idea what Patel had planned for them, but he was certain it wouldn't be a simple arrest. Meera nodded, her face hard with determination. Seema and a man flanked the rear, eyes darting between the shadows, always on alert. They knew that this mission would determine everything. If they failed now, everything they had sacrificed would be for nothing. They reached the warehouse door, and Arjun signaled for Meera to take point. She kicked it open, and the team swept inside, their movements swift and synchronized. The interior was dimly lit, the faint hum of electricity buzzing overhead. But there was no sign of Patel, at least, not yet. "Spread out," Arjun ordered, his voice cutting through the silence. The team fanned out, searching every nook and cranny, but the place was disturbingly empty. Then, a sound, a faint, metallic clicking noise echoed from the far side of the warehouse. Arjun's instincts flared. It was a trap. "Get down," he shouted, but it was too late. A loud bang echoed through the room as an explosion tore through the floor beneath them, sending debris flying in all directions. The team was thrown into chaos. Arjun barely managed to roll to the side as the force of the blast knocked him off his feet. His head rang with the impact, and his vision blurred for a moment. But he could hear the frantic shouts of his team, the crackle of gunfire in the distance. "Arjun!" Meera's voice cut through the noise, sharp and full of fear. "Get up. We need to move." Shaking off the dizziness, Arjun pushed himself to his feet. The blast had disoriented him, but he couldn't afford to let that slow him down. Patel had planned this, and it was clear he wasn't going to let them take him easily. "Seema, a man, find the source of that explosion," Arjun barked. "Meera, stay with me." They moved quickly, the air thick with dust and smoke. The building was crumbling around them, but they couldn't afford to stop. Every second counted. As they pushed forward, Arjun's heart skipped a beat. He spotted a figure in the distance, a shadow, barely visible through the haze. Patel. The man was standing in the center of the room, a sinister grin on his face, a detonator in his hand. Arjun's blood ran cold. Patel had set a timer to destroy the warehouse, and they were running out of time. "Patel." Arjun called out, his voice steady despite the danger. "It's over. You've lost." Patel laughed, the sound twisted with arrogance. "Lost? Do you think you've won, Officer Mayor? This was never about just me. You're in the game now. And the game doesn't end with one player, it ends with the whole system falling." "Shut up," Arjun growled. He lunged forward, but Patel was quicker, moving behind a stack of crates, the detonator still in his hand. "Come and get me," Patel taunted. But as he spoke, Arjun saw it, he saw the small red light flashing on the detonator. "A countdown. Move," Arjun shouted, as he and Meera sprinted toward the crates, guns raised. But as they neared, Patel pressed the button. The world erupted in chaos once again. The explosion shook the entire building, and Arjun was thrown back by the force. The blast knocked him to the ground, and everything went black. When Arjun regained consciousness, the world was nothing but smoke and ruin. His body ached from the impact, but he could still hear the faint sounds of his team, their voices calling his name. "Arjun! Arjun!" Meera's voice was frantic, and her hand was on his shoulder, shaking him awake. He opened his eyes slowly, the smoke filling his lungs. The building was collapsing, but they had no time to waste. "Is everyone?" he began to ask, but his words were cut off by the loud groan of the structure around them. "We're okay, but we need to get out now," Meera urged, pulling him to his feet. Arjun stumbled, disoriented, but he knew they had to move fast. The clock was ticking, and the countdown from the detonator had been a warning. If they didn't escape now, they'd all be trapped. Together, they fought their way through the collapsing building, the debris falling around them. Saima and a man led the way, guiding Arjun and Meera through the maze of rubble. The exit was just ahead, but the building was crumbling faster than they expected. Finally, they burst through the door just as the building collapsed behind them. They made it out by mere seconds, collapsing to the ground outside, gasping for breath. The warehouse was in ruins, nothing but smoldering remains. And Patel? Gone. Arjun lay on the ground, his body exhausted but his mind racing. This was far from over. The shadows had receded for now, but the fight was far from finished. They still had to take down the rest of the empire, those who had been pulling the strings for so long. As Arjun looked up at the stars above, he knew one thing for certain: justice wasn't a destination. It was a never-ending fight. The dust had barely settled, but Arjun could still hear the echoes of the explosion in his mind. The warehouse lay in ruins, a graveyard of metal and concrete. But amidst the devastation, the one thought that kept pounding in his head was, Patel is still out there. Arjun stood up slowly, his body aching, the weight of his injuries almost forgotten in the midst of the chaos. Meera was by his side, her face drawn with exhaustion, but there was a fire in her eyes, one that mirrored his own. We got out, but we didn't finish it, Meera said, her voice steady, though there was a note of frustration in it. Patel was only the beginning. Arjun nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. The empire he was part of is bigger than we thought. We need to take down the entire system, not just the players we've caught. We can't do it alone, Saima's voice cut in, urgent. We need more help. It's not just about us anymore. There are forces beyond our control, forces with power and influence in every corner of this city. A man, always the pragmatic one, added, if we go after them now, we're going to need a solid strategy. We can't just rush in blindly. We've seen how they fight. Arjun glanced at each of his team members. They had been through hell and back, and yet they were still standing, still fighting. But he knew the fight was about to get even harder. They had uncovered the depths of the conspiracy, and now they were all marked targets. We need to stay one step ahead, Arjun said, his voice low but determined. The Vipers network isn't just a criminal syndicate. It's a multi-headed beast with influence everywhere. We've exposed the tip of the iceberg. The real danger is in the people we haven't even touched yet, the ones pulling the strings from the shadows. Meera met his gaze, her expression hard. I know, Arjun. But we can't keep fighting this alone. We need allies, people who can help us take them down from the inside. Arjun's mind raced. Allies. It seemed impossible. Everyone they'd trusted so far had betrayed them at some point. Even those within the police force weren't safe, as the Viper had its claws deep in every system. We need to find people who believe in justice as much as we do, Arjun said, the weight of his words pressing down on him. We have to be careful, though. There could be a traitor in our ranks. The thought sent a chill down his spine. He had never felt more alone. But he had to push that fear aside. They had come too far. The enemy was ruthless, but they had something the enemy didn't, the truth. And as long as they had that, they had hope. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to gather intel, trying to find any allies they could trust. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes were higher than ever. But with every lead they followed, the walls seemed to close in on them. The Vipers' network was vast, and every time they made progress, it felt as though 100 more barriers appeared in their path. Then came the phone call. Arjun sat at his desk, going over case files, when his phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, but his instincts told him to answer. Arjun Meher, the voice on the other end said, cold and familiar. I know what you're doing. And I know you're not going to stop. The hairs on the back of Arjun's neck stood up. Who is this? There was a pause, then a laugh, a low, sinister sound. Let's just say I'm someone who has been keeping an eye on you. You've been making waves, Officer Meher. But now, you're getting too close. You think you can expose the truth. It's not that simple. There are forces you don't understand, people who won't let you take them down. Arjun's grip on the phone tightened. What do you want? I want you to stop, the voice said, the threat hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Because if you don't, The next time you're at the edge of victory, you won't have anyone left to help you." Before Arjun could respond, the line went dead. Meera walked in just as he put the phone down, her brow furrowed with concern. "What was that about?" Arjun rubbed his temples, his mind racing. "It's them. They know we're getting close, Meera. And they're warning us. The people we're up against are more powerful than we ever realized." Meera stood silent for a moment before speaking. "Then we fight back. We go after them, and we take them down no matter who they are." Arjun's eyes met hers, and for the first time in days, he felt the weight of the burden they carried shift, just a little. "Together," he said quietly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of high-stakes operations, clandestine meetings, and risky maneuvers. The team found themselves moving in and out of dangerous territory, always a step away from being caught, but they couldn't stop now. They had already exposed too much. There was no turning back. But with every victory, there was also a loss. They lost people. They lost trust. They lost parts of themselves in the fight for justice. But the one thing they didn't lose was their resolve. Then came the breakthrough. One night, after a particularly dangerous raid, they uncovered a shocking piece of evidence, a list of names, high-ranking officials, businessmen, judges, and law enforcement officers connected to the Vipers network. Among them were figures that Arjun had never suspected, people who seemed above reproach. And in the middle of the list was a name that sent a chill through his spine: Raghav Gupta. Raghav Gupta. The man who had been Arjun's mentor. The man who had once taught him everything he knew about the system. The man who had always seemed to be on the right side of justice. Now, it was clear, Gupta was one of them. The revelation that Raghav Gupta was involved with the Vipers network hit Arjun like a tidal wave. He stared at the list, the name glaring back at him. His mentor, the man who had shaped his career, had been working in the shadows all along. How could he? Arjun muttered under his breath, his mind reeling. Raghav had always been the one to teach him the importance of justice, of upholding the law, of doing the right thing no matter the cost. And yet, here he was, one of the key players in the corruption that had plagued their city. Meera stood beside him, her face grim. "We can't let this stop us, Arjun. We've come too far. But we need to confront him." Arjun nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of the desk. "I know. But if Gupta is part of this, it means the whole system is more corrupt than we ever imagined. We can't trust anyone anymore." "We'll deal with him," Meera said firmly. "But we have to stay focused. We're closer than ever." The team knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. They had been chasing shadows for so long, uncovering layer after layer of deception. But now, with Gupta's name on the list, everything had shifted. The fight for justice had become personal. The next few days were a blur. The team gathered evidence, laid their plans, and made their move. But Arjun's thoughts were consumed with the inevitable moment when he would have to face Raghav Gupta, the man who had been a father figure to him, who had shaped his ideals and beliefs. They tracked Gupta's movements, gathering intelligence, waiting for the perfect moment to confront him. But every time Arjun thought about it, his stomach churned. He had once looked up to the man, believed in him. Now, he was nothing more than a traitor. It was late one evening when they finally cornered Gupta in a private meeting room in an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The walls were cold, the air thick with tension. Arjun, Meera, Seema, and a man stood together, weapons drawn, their eyes focused on the man standing in front of them, Raghav Gupta. "Arjun," Gupta said, his voice calm, almost as if nothing had changed. "I knew this day would come." Arjun's jaw clenched. "You should have known it sooner," he replied, his voice cold. "We know everything, Gupta. The Vipers network. The money. The corruption. You've been a part of it all along." Gupta's face remained impassive. "You're still young, Arjun. You think the world is black and white. You think you can fight corruption with just your ideals. But you can't. The world is much more complicated than you realize. The system is broken, and I've been trying to fix it from the inside." "Fix it?" Arjun's voice trembled with rage. "By destroying it. By becoming part of the very thing you claimed to fight against." Gupta sighed, stepping closer. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do. I had to protect the people I cared about. The system wasn't going to change on its own. It needed someone like me, someone with power, someone who could control it from within. You never saw the bigger picture, Arjun. You were always too focused on the small victories, the easy wins. Small victories? Arjun's fists clenched at his sides. You've been feeding the system with corruption. You've been a part of the problem, not the solution. Gupta's eyes darkened. I did what needed to be done. And now you're in my way. Suddenly, the tension in the room shifted. Arjun could feel the danger in the air, the growing sense of urgency. Gupta wasn't just talking. He was preparing to make his move. You think you can take me down, Arjun? Gupta said, his voice turning cold. You're nothing but a pawn in a game much larger than you can comprehend. And when the game is over, there will be nothing left of you. Arjun's hand tightened around his gun. It's over, Gupta. But before he could pull the trigger, Gupta made a move. With a swift motion, he pulled a hidden weapon from his jacket. Arjun's heart raced, but Meera was quicker. She fired first, striking Gupta in the shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound the ragged breathing of the men and women who had fought so hard to get to this point. Gupta lay on the floor, clutching his bleeding shoulder. His face twisted with pain and frustration, but there was no regret in his eyes, only a cold, calculating expression. You won this round, Arjun. But the war isn't over. There are others, many others, waiting in the shadows. And they'll come for you. We'll be ready, Arjun said, his voice firm. And when they do, we'll make sure they pay for everything they've done. With that, Arjun and his team took Gupta into custody. The battle for justice was far from over, but it was a victory nonetheless. They had exposed the corruption at the heart of the city, taken down one of the most powerful men in the system, and brought justice to those who had been oppressed for far too long. As the sun began to rise over the city, Arjun looked out over the horizon. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was always worth it. And no matter how many obstacles stood in his way, he knew one thing for certain: he would never stop fighting. Not while there was still breath in his body. Not while there was still hope for a better world. The blind police officer who had fought for justice had finally found his way. And the fight had just begun. The end.